In the late 19th century, Victorian England was a world of sharp contrasts. The Industrial Revolution had brought about rapid social and technological change, transforming cities like London into bustling hubs of innovation and commerce. But beneath the surface of this progress lay a dark underbelly of poverty, crime, and despair. It was in this grim environment that one of history's most chilling figures emerged, Dr. Thomas Neill Cream, a man whose medical knowledge and charming demeanor masked a deadly secret. Known as the Lambeth Poisoner, Cream was a physician who used his expertise not to heal, but to harm. His reign of terror spanned multiple countries, leaving a trail of death and mystery that baffled authorities for years. Cream's crimes were methodical and calculated, targeting the most vulnerable members of society, often women who were desperate for help and unaware that they were placing their trust in a cold-blooded killer. In this episode, we delve deep into the life and crimes of Dr. Thomas Neill Cream, exploring how a man sworn to save lives became one of history's most notorious serial killers. From his early days as a promising medical student to his transformation into a remorseless murderer, we'll take you on a journey through the twisted mind of a doctor who used poison as his weapon of choice. Cream's story is not just one of murder, but also of manipulation, deception, and the dangerous allure of power. Join us as we unravel the tale of the Lambeth Poisoner, a man whose crimes shocked the world and left a chilling legacy. Thomas Neill Cream was born on May 27, 1850, in Glasgow, Scotland, into a family of modest means. His father, William Cream, was a prosperous shipowner, and the family eventually emigrated to Canada when Thomas was just 4 years old. They settled in Quebec, where Cream spent much of his childhood. As a young boy, Cream showed a keen intellect and an aptitude for science, traits that would later lead him to pursue a career in medicine. In 1872, at the age of 22, Cream enrolled in McGill University in Montreal, one of Canada's leading medical schools. It was here that he began to develop a fascination with toxicology, the study of poisons. Cream was a diligent student, and his professors noted his keen interest in the effects of various substances on the human body. However, even in his early years, there were signs that Cream's interest in medicine was not entirely benevolent. He was known to be arrogant, manipulative, and prone to fits of rage, traits that would later become hallmarks of his criminal behavior. After graduating from McGill in 1876 with a medical degree, Cream briefly returned to England, where he continued his studies at St. Thomas's Hospital in London. It was during this period that Cream's dark side began to emerge. In 1879, a young woman named Kate Gardner was found dead from an apparent chloroform overdose in an office Cream had rented in London. Gardner was pregnant at the time, and it was widely believed that Cream had performed an illegal abortion, leading to her death. Although Cream was suspected in the case, there was insufficient evidence to charge him, and he returned to Canada shortly thereafter. Back in Canada, Cream established a medical practice in London, Ontario, where he continued to operate under a veneer of respectability. However, his penchant for illicit activities soon caught up with him. Cream was linked to several suspicious deaths, often involving women who were patients or acquaintances. These cases were characterized by their mysterious circumstances and the presence of toxic substances, but Cream's involvement was never definitively proven, allowing him to continue his deadly pursuits. In 1881, Cream moved to Chicago, where he set up a practice in a poor neighborhood. It was here that his criminal activities escalated. Cream began performing illegal abortions, a risky and often fatal procedure at the time. Several women died under his care, leading to further suspicions. However, Cream was a master of evasion, and he managed to escape legal consequences by moving frequently and using his charm to disarm authorities. His ability to elude capture during this period only added to his confidence, emboldening him to continue his crimes with increasing brazenness. By the time Dr. Thomas Neill Cream returned to London in 1891, his descent into murder was complete. He settled in the Lambeth district, a working-class area of South London, where he quickly resumed his criminal activities. This time, however, Cream was more deliberate in his approach. He targeted women, particularly those who were vulnerable or socially marginalized, using poison to carry out his murders. Lambeth, at that time, was a grim and impoverished district, rife with crime and disease. The area was home to many of London's poorest citizens, and it was a place where a man like Cream could operate with relative impunity. The local population, desperate for medical care, often turned to Cream for help, unaware of the danger they were in. Cream's preferred method of killing was strychnine, a highly toxic substance that causes a painful and agonizing death. Strychnine was readily available at the time, often used as a pesticide, but in the hands of a doctor like Cream, it became a weapon of murder. Cream would often pose as a concerned doctor, offering his victims medication that he claimed would cure their ailments. In reality, these medicines were laced with deadly poison. Cream took pleasure in watching his victims suffer, and he would often stay nearby to observe the effects of the poison, sometimes even visiting the scene of the crime after the fact to ensure that his work had been successful. One of Cream's most infamous victims was Matilda Clover, a young woman who lived in Lambeth. Clover was found dead in her home in October 1891, and her death was initially attributed to natural causes. Clover was a sex worker, and like many women in her position, she had few options for medical care. Cream took advantage of this vulnerability, offering her a cure for a supposed illness. The cure, of course, was strychnine. Clover's death was ruled as being due to natural causes, but Cream could not resist boasting about his crime. Cream's arrogance would prove to be his downfall. After Clover's death, he sent a letter to the coroner, accusing another doctor of being responsible for her death. This bizarre attempt to divert suspicion backfired, drawing attention to Cream himself. The coroner, puzzled by the letter, began to investigate the case more thoroughly, and Cream's name began to surface in connection with other suspicious deaths in the area. As the number of deaths in Lambeth continued to rise, the police began to suspect that a serial killer was at work. The investigation intensified, and Cream's behavior became increasingly erratic. He wrote letters to the police and to newspapers, taunting them with his knowledge of the crimes and offering to help solve them. These letters, filled with arrogance and bravado, would ultimately be his undoing. Cream seemed to revel in the attention, believing himself to be untouchable. But the walls were closing in, and it was only a matter of time before he made a fatal mistake. Dr. Thomas Neill Cream's reign of terror came to an end in 1892, after he made a critical mistake. While in London, Cream attempted to blackmail a wealthy businessman by threatening to expose him as the perpetrator of one of the murders. The businessman, realizing that Cream was the true culprit, reported the incident to the police. This led to Cream's arrest on charges of blackmail, but as the investigation progressed, the full extent of his crimes began to emerge. The arrest of Dr. Thomas Neill Cream was a significant moment in the history of criminal justice. At a time when forensic science was still in its infancy, Cream's capture and eventual conviction were a testament to the persistence and ingenuity of the investigators involved. The police, armed with little more than witness testimony and circumstantial evidence, managed to piece together a case that would ultimately bring one of history's most notorious criminals to justice. During his trial, which took place at the Old Bailey in London, Cream maintained his innocence, despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. The prosecution presented a compelling case, detailing how Cream had used his medical knowledge to procure poisons and administer them to his victims. Witnesses testified about his suspicious behavior, and forensic evidence linked him to several of the deaths. The prosecution also introduced Cream's letters, in which he boasted about his crimes and taunted the authorities. The trial captivated the public, with newspapers reporting every detail of the proceedings. The courtroom was packed with spectators, eager to see the man who had terrorized Lambeth brought to justice. Cream's calm demeanor in the face of such serious charges only added to his notoriety. He seemed almost indifferent to the proceedings, confident that he could outsmart the prosecution and the jury. But as the evidence mounted, it became clear that Cream's arrogance had finally caught up with him. The jury took little time to reach a verdict. On October 15, 1892, Dr. Thomas Neill Cream was found guilty of murder and sentenced to death. The judge, in delivering the sentence, remarked on the cold-blooded nature of Cream's crimes and the calculated manner in which he had carried them out. Cream showed no emotion as the sentence was read, maintaining his air of indifference to the very end. On November 15, 1892, Dr. Thomas Neill Cream was hanged at Newgate Prison in London. His execution was a public event, drawing a large crowd of onlookers. Cream's last words, according to some reports, were a chilling confession, "I am Jack the..." before he was cut off by the hangman. This statement, though likely an attempt to secure his place in criminal infamy, fueled speculation that Cream might have been responsible for the Jack the Ripper murders. However, this theory is widely discredited, as Cream was in prison in Illinois at the time of the Ripper killings. Dr. Thomas Neill Cream's legacy is one of horror and infamy. His crimes highlighted the dangers of placing blind trust in authority figures, particularly those in the medical profession. Cream's ability to evade capture for so long was a testament to his cunning and the limitations of forensic science at the time. His case also underscored the vulnerability of women in Victorian society, many of whom were easy targets for a predator like Cream. The story of the Lambeth Poisoner is not just a tale of one man's descent into madness and murder, it is also a reflection of the broader societal issues of the time. Victorian England was a society in transition, grappling with the consequences of rapid industrialization and urbanization. The vast disparity between the rich and the poor, the lack of access to medical care for the most vulnerable, and the general mistrust of the medical profession all played a role in Cream's ability to carry out his crimes. In the years since his execution, Cream has been the subject of numerous books, documentaries, and studies, each attempting to unravel the mystery of his life and crimes. His story continues to be a source of fascination for true crime enthusiasts and historians alike, offering a glimpse into the mind of a man who used his knowledge for evil. Cream's case also serves as a cautionary tale for the medical profession, highlighting the potential for abuse of power and the importance of ethical standards in medicine. As we reflect on the life of Dr. Thomas Neill Cream, we are reminded of the importance of vigilance and skepticism, especially when dealing with those who hold power over life and death. Cream's story serves as a cautionary tale about the potential for darkness within the human soul and the devastating consequences that can result when that darkness is allowed to flourish unchecked. If you found this video informative, please like and subscribe to our channel. In our next episode, we'll explore the unsettling case of Charles Edmund Lewis, whose unethical practices and harmful treatments shocked the medical community. Stay tuned as we uncover the dark side of healthcare and the impact of his actions on patients.